You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
What's going on, everybody? Thanks again for hitting that play button. Not a lot to discuss in the pre-show. So really, just game over is in there, is in the show notes again. You're probably sick of me saying this, but I'm trying to get it to at least 1,000 views, just organically through mentioning it on this show. Also, again, if you go to the pre-show notes on every single episode, there's a ton of free stuff that is out there. And again, it's just a little resource there for every single episode, just to whatever you're working on, just for you. And please check that out. It's always on every single show note for every single episode. And also, the Masterclass contest. If you want to be entered in to win a free year of Masterclass, please go to our iTunes page, rank the show, please give it 5 stars when you rate it, and then just send me the link or a picture of your review so I can put you into the drawing. And I think this is a really, really cool prize to give away, because there's so many filmmaking resources on there now. You can do acting with Samuel L. Jackson. They have filmmaking by Martin Scorsese coming up, which is going to be huge. So it's a really cool project really cool prize that ties in with everything. And again, all you have to do is leave a review on iTunes. We are slowly approaching the 200th episode, and we're about 6 away now, because this is episode 194. So who is the mystery guest going to be for 200? I just don't know yet. Well, I kind of have an idea, but I don't want to tell you anything yet. And I'm also going to be releasing a poster, and I'm also going to be releasing a blog post, sort of surmising a lot of these episodes. And I'm going to make it a little different than my first blog post, which was what I learned doing 100 episodes of my podcast. I want to make it a little more something, because I just feel that everyone does that now. What I learned doing X, Y, and Z, or what, you won't believe what happens next. So it's kind of like clickbaity now, and I don't want to be that person. So I'm going to do something a little more special. I don't know what that exactly is yet, but I'm going to keep working on it. So without further ado, my next guest is a filmmaker and stuntman. He began his career in 2014, just directing, with his debut of the horror film Delirium, which is actually coming out the beginning of next year, by the way, which is January 2018. He went on to direct 2 other films, Vengeance, a Love Story, starring Nicolas Cage and Don Johnson, and Hangman, which is the film we're going to talk about today, a lot about today, starring Al Pacino, Karl Urban, and Brittany Snow. We also talk a lot about doing stunts, because he was in a really cool movie called Killer Clowns from Outer Space. This is episode 194 with guest Johnny Martin.
You're listening to the Dave Bullis Podcast.
And I really appreciate that too. We have a mutual friend in Mr. Kehoe, and is it just me, Johnny, or does Michael Kehoe know everybody?
Michael Kehoe not only knows her, he knows people he doesn't even know yet. So.
Yeah, it always seems like Mike always knows somebody else. He's always, I see him talking to somebody else or just, mentioning somebody else. I'm like, my God, this man must not sleep. He must just either call or go to networking parties, or just, he has his finger on the button. Like he has it all working together.
Well, I've known him for a long, long time, probably over 18, 20 years. And back then, he always talked about directing and doing all these movies, and I just thought, well, he's craft service, really? And I was always told today's craft service is tomorrow's director. And sure enough, this man pulled it off. He's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely did. And, and speaking about, today's craft services is tomorrow's director, there's a lot of ways to get into the film industry. I mean, everyone I've had on here has a unique story. So I wanted to ask Johnny, how did you break into the film industry?
Well, it's such a great story, and I'm very proud of it. And basically, when I was 7 years old, I used to go to car washes all the time, because when I grew up, it was like the 70s, and they always had the hot rods coming into the car washes, and I was a huge car fan. So one day, all of a sudden, this car pulls up with a trailer behind it with a smashed-up car, and this guy steps out, and he looked like Burt Reynolds coming out of his car. He just was an amazing man. I had to ride my bike up to him and ask him, what happened to your car? And he goes, this isn't a car. her name's Eleanor. He goes, Eleanor, meet, and he asked my name, and I told him. He goes, yeah, Eleanor's a star in my movie called Gone in 60 Seconds, and I'm the director, producer, stuntman, actor, writer, and I'm out there delivering my movie to all the theaters and self-distribute this film. And I said, I don't understand that. So we sat for like 2 hours, and he explained everything to me. At the end of the conversation, I said, I want to do what you do. And he says, well, look, if you go home and study and train, you can come see me when you're 18, and I will help you out. So sure enough, that day I went home and I started training. I started training how to be a stuntman and act. I took acting classes. And when I turned 18, sure enough, I got in that car, went to L.A., called my mom to tell her I was there. And she said, honey, I got bad news for you. H.B. Halicki, he died today doing the movie Gone in 60 Seconds Part 2. And so I went there. I was left alone, not knowing what to do. So I worked my butt off. And 10 years later, I got asked to stunt coordinate and design all the action for an upcoming Jerry Bruckheimer movie, where I was starting to get out of that part of it in my life and starting to only direct and produce. And I said, well, what's the name of the movie? And they said, well, it's Gone in 60 Seconds. And so it was just this amazing turnaround. It was like HB was still taking care of me. And I ended up winning an award for Best Coordination of the Year. So it was really a thrill.
You know, that's absolutely amazing. That's absolutely amazing, Johnny, where you got to actually be a part of the movie that you started with. And, you know, that's amazing. And so, I mean, you did a lot of different stunts, and I looked at your IMDb, and there's one movie, Johnny, I have to ask about, and you did stunts for Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
Oh, my God. You don't understand. I did the Titanic. I've done the Matrices. I've done the Terminators. I've done tons of huge movies, but the number one question everyone asks me, you were in Killer Clowns. So it's so funny. That little cult movie was one of my first films that I acted and did stunts, and I played 3 of the clowns, and I did everything on that show, and it ended up becoming my most memorable movie. You know, I keep getting gifts from all over and autographs signed for that movie, too. It's just crazy.
Yeah, you know, one day I was at like a Big Lots. I don't know if Big Lots is kind of like this big box discount store, and I was there, and they have a movie section, and I found Killer Clowns there one day, and I said, I remember this movie as a kid, so I take it up to the register, right, and I'm checking out, and the girl scanning the DVDs I'm buying, and she stops on Killer Clowns, and she goes, oh my God. She goes, I remember this movie. And she starts telling everyone around her, she goes, have you ever seen this movie? She goes, it is freaking awesome. She goes, it's about these clowns who come in from outer space, and they're turning people into these cotton candy cocoons, and everyone now is like getting around her, looking at this DVD case of Killer Clowns, and they're like, oh my God, is there more copies back there? Oh my God, this looks awesome. And I'm like, yeah, it's this fun movie that just came out of nowhere, and I remember seeing it as a kid growing up, and I by the way, I have another copy. You can't see it because it's on a podcast, but I have a copy on my bookshelf.
That's great. Well, I'm in talks with the Kyoto brothers to see if I could produce the part 2 of that. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and I think like part 2 would be absolutely awesome. I think movies, especially movies like that, I think now are more prevalent than ever. Because I mean, I know, I'm starting to get the superhero fatigue, and I'm starting to, you know what I mean? I know people who work on those movies, and I want to support them, but at the same time, I'm like, I am way more interested in seeing like a Coen Brothers movie, you know what I mean, or something like that, where it's like this fun movie, or something like something else that has come out recently that just blew me away was 3 Billboards. Have you seen that yet?
No, I haven't.
Oh, yeah, it's fantastic. But I'm sorry, I'm getting off track now, Johnny. But no,
okay.
Yeah, but
I love it.
But yeah, it's that's why I think movies like that, it stays in that zeitgeist because it's such a fun movie. And you mentioned doing stunts for Titanic too. I promise, Johnny, I was going to mention that too because I saw you did. I saw Titanic on your IMDb, and I said, I'll ask about Titanic, then Killer Clowns. But so I mean, so Johnny, just as we talk about stunts and everything. There's been like guys like Jason Statham who've mentioned that stunt guys should get their own category at the Academy Awards because they do a lot of dangerous work. They do a lot of different the car flips, the break jumping through the glass, all that stuff. All that dangerous work. So as a stunt guy yourself, what are your thoughts about the stunt guys getting their own category in the Academy Awards?
Well, I agree and disagree with it. And the part I agree with is that, yeah, the number one genre that makes the most money in the film industry is action movies. So it is all of us out there that at least what I was. But the other point of it too is that, you have to declare who is a filmmaker. And to me, to be nominated for Academy Award, you have to be a true filmmaker. And there are a lot of some people that are not filmmakers. They are just guys that like to get hit by cars and like to crash up and wreck things and all that. But then there's those great second unit directors and stunt coordinators out there that know how to design amazing action that helps drive not only the story but the characters as well. I mean, there's nothing better than seeing a great action that helps just tell you who this character truly is and what he's feeling without having to say it. And that's, to me, very rare to see. Like the Bourne Identity movies, to me, I'm very impressed by, because they, the action is really only 20%. The rest is all the acting of Matt Damon, and you see what he's reacting to, and it's so believable. Where then you jump into Fast and Furious, which I think is, amazing stunt work and all that, but and designed very great. But my issue is that, is there a character in that car, or is it the car that's being the hero? And that's, to me, the point, that if they do this, they have to make it clear that it should go to a filmmaker, not because someone made $500 million in the box office on a great action movie.
Yeah, I see what you mean. And because sometimes in movies like Fast and the Furious, the sort of the car itself, the muscle cars, the exotics, they're like the sort of center of attention in a lot of those action set pieces.
Yeah, and that's not what the story's about. It's not about the car; it's about who's driving the car and where they're going.
Yeah, and that'd be funny if it actually like turned into something like Transformers, where it's kind of like the same thing, But so as you took your career, Johnny, as you got to do more and more stunts, you started producing, and again, as we were talking, it's always interesting to see the trajectory of careers. So as you go from stunts to producing, how did you make that sort of transition from one to the other?
Well, I mean, the whole reason why I got into stunts, I happened to be really good at it, so I was fortunate to stay in it for as long as I did, probably longer than I wanted to stay, but I wanted to learn from some of the top directors. What better way of getting behind Tony Scott and James Cameron than to get on the set as a stuntman and stay on for a few weeks instead of just trying to sneak on. So that was mainly my main idea. Then when I started to watch it, I realized how much money is being overspent when people are just trying to spend money. And when you look at studio movies, you look at it where they're spending $100 million. Well, really only $50 million got put in the movie. The rest are executive charges, studio charges, and all that. So movies aren't really $100 million. I'm like, well, why can't you make, and I started seeing the decline of video and blockbusters and all that. And I'm like, well, where is the recoupment going to come from? Well, we have to start making movies for less. And sure enough, that's what started happening. And so when I started deciding that I wanted to produce, I knew that I knew how to shoot action. I knew how to do it quickly. And that was the most expensive part of making action movies, is the action. So I went to Millennium Films, Avi Lerner, and I told him, well, how much do you do your sci-fi movies for? And he says, $1.8 million. I said, and you shoot it where? And he goes, in Bulgaria. I said, well, what if I tell you I could shoot one of your sci-fi movies the same style, same way for $300,000, and I'll shoot it in L.A.? He said, it's impossible. And so I had my actors, Casper Van Dien and Michael Rooker, call up Avi and say, I think he could do it. I really believe in him. And sure enough, we pulled it off for $310,000, and this movie became Sci-Fi Film of the Year. And then I did another one, and I said, can I have the 1.5? And he said, no, I'll give you 700, because he wanted to test me. And sure enough, I did that one for 700, and that became Sci-Fi Movie of the Year the following year. And then Avi started giving me more and more films to produce after that. So it was more or less knowing, and through my career, I've always wanted to learn every department. I thought learning from this man, H.B. Alicki, that I met when I was 7 years old, the key to becoming a great filmmaker is to learn everyone's job. I learned how to do special effects. I learned how to do visual effects. I learned every single career. When I had a day off, I'd go spend it with some of my buddies that did another career than I did. And I tried to learn it so I could become the ultimate filmmaker. And that's where I thought producing would be very, very good for me. And it's paid off very well for me as far as my career. I got to be the first company to travel to China and to co-produce a movie with China Film Group about 5 years ago in 2013 called Urban Games. And I got to show them how you could pull off a movie where they thought they needed $18 million. I did it for $7.5 for them. So it worked out really well. They wanted me to stay there, and I just couldn't stay in China. I wanted to come back home and do some real movies. So,
well, if you did stay in China, just sort of playing like a what if game, Johnny. If you did stay in China, do you think that they would have just been coming up to you with like, project after project and just saying, "Hey, Johnny, could you produce this film in Beijing and then go to like to Szechuan and do this film?"
Yeah, I was asked to go to Canada. In my movie, we went to Seoul, Korea, and to Beijing. And the problem I had with it is similar to TV in China, where the producer isn't the filmmaker, it's really the director, and in TV, it's the writer who is the producer. And so it became something where I'm a creative producer, and I'm not the kind of producer that just needs to push numbers around and get things done at a certain price. I want to be a part of the filmmaking experience and to help scenes get better. And when I went to China, it was more that I had these ideas, but the director got to override me, where in my films here as a producer, I got to say what I wanted and felt that you needed to shoot this no matter what, and I got it done. And so that's why I really didn't want to stay in China for very much longer, because I didn't want to just be a guy that did the numbers. I wasn't that. I was built to make movies, not to just help create movies by money.
Yeah, and I think that's very virtuous of you, Johnny, because you realize you want to stay true to yourself. You don't want to just sit there and you want to make your own movies. You don't want to make other people's movies.
Exactly.
So, by the way, I don't know if do you know Peter Marshall?
Name sounds familiar.
He's like he does a lot of first AD work. He's worked a lot with John Woo, but he actually was in China for a while doing different movies and stuff like that. But yeah, I just wanted to ask if you knew him, just in case you two ever crossed paths.
It very well might be that I do know him, because I've done a few John Woo movies. So
yeah, he's a real good guy too. And so, but yeah, if you don't know him though, Johnny, let me know and I'll introduce you to.
You got it. Sounds great.
So as you sort of got better at producing, you were able to sort of do different things with money. Was your budget sort of rising incrementally, or did you ever find yourself, Johnny, like somebody would say, "Oh no, look, Johnny, we're only going to give you $500,000 or $1 million," and then when you went to make your second, third, and fourth, they just kept it at that same point where it was like, "Johnny, we're only going to give you $50 million or $500,000 or $1 million," or did they allow you to, or did you were able to get it to go up incrementally?
Well, after I did those two sci-fi movies, that's when Avi asked me to do a third, and I said no. I want to step up to a budget where I could actually make a film that I believe in, not just having to put it together and do whatever I could for the money. So immediately there, I jumped up to the $5 to $7 million range, and I did 3 or 4 Cuba Gooding Jr. movies that he starred in. It was just right when Wesley Snipes went to jail, and Cuba was right there to fill in for the next great action hero, where I was hoping to try to get these dramas and rewrite them into, action pieces, but not action movies, where, it would help Cuba, because I'm a real big fan of Cuba Gooding, and I just wanted to see him just raise his career up by not being sold out as an action star, but being an action quality actor. And so that's what I started to do, and I found a niche in that spot, and that's where I realized that if you have like 2.1 to 2.5 below the line, that's where most movies today are being made. Everyone gets caught up in numbers, and they think that, I got $11 million budget. I guarantee that $11 million budget still has a below the line to make the movie around 2.1 to 2.9. Just because it fluctuates. I've done movies for $7 million to $9 million to $12 million to $13 million, and yet the below the line is still around $3 million or less. That doesn't change because today's movies, because there is no payoff in VOD and Blockbuster. And Netflix isn't buying as much as we thought they would, and China stopped buying altogether. It really makes it hard for anyone to recoup. So I was lucky that I found that niche, because right when I started really getting further and further into it, that's when I realized that all the movies have to be made for that, unless they're sequels or they're a Marvel comic. All the rest of the movies are still being done at this level. And the problem is, a lot of the studio guys don't know how to do movies at this price. They don't know about sales. That's where Avi Lerner taught me, what each country buys films for, what every actor is worth, and how much you have to make a movie. His goal all along was always make a movie for what you could pre-sell this movie, lower it by $1 million, And then you can make that movie for that and know that you always have $1 million profit. And no matter what the movie is, you have to, as a great producer, you have to figure out how to do that movie for the money that's going to make the company money. So that's what I learned. And so now, basically, I'm still doing the same. I mean, my movie's 11 million, but yet still below the lines are still under 3.
And that's a great bit of advice, by the way, Johnny. I really like that advice because just how it ties in as well. Just with just this podcast, I've had filmmakers on who've done their first movie, their second movies, their third movies, and some of them have made a comedy as their first movie. And one of the things that we talked about on here, they said, Dave, it's whenever we go to like foreign sales agents or we go to do VOD or to any of these like aggregators, like there's tons of them out there. But if they go to any of them, they always say, well, who's in it? And they go, well, it's nobody. Well, they say, well, you can't really sell a comedy as your first movie with a lot of unknown actors and expect it to get a wide release. So they always said, go out and make a horror movie instead. What do you think about that advice, though, John, just to make a horror movie as your first movie?
Well, I think that the advice that person said is even worse than what we all thought today. I mean, nowadays, 80% of the movies that are being made by independent, not studios. Studios just buy our movies, throw their name on it, and now everyone thinks I got a Lionsgate movie. It's like, no, I did it through Patriot Pictures. And then they just bought it at the end for 2.7 or 2.8, but now it looks like it was a Lionsgate movie. So knowing that, we can't even sell movies. And since we're in the independent world, we're not fortunate to do movies without cast. I mean, that we can't even sell it and get our domestic out of it. So we have to have a cast to it. If you try to make a movie without an actor and you think you got gold, well, guess what? It's probably going to end up sitting on a shelf, or it's going to be sold to a distributor that will prove that you never made a dime when he made all the money. So you should never, ever try to do that. Horror movies, it's very tricky. It's like a good example is what happened to me is that I needed to show everyone I could direct. Everyone knew I could produce. Everyone knew I could do action, direct action, but they didn't know if I could direct a film with actors. So I went ahead and wrote a movie about my friends that I grew up with, that we used to go to the scary house when we were kids, and we had this, hell gang, and I created the story around it, and I shot at the original house that we used to sneak in at night, and I made it found footage because found footage was dead. Well, I started getting the news from everyone that found footage was going to die sooner or later. So I had to rush and get this movie into editing and post and clean it up and get it ready. And by the time that I was ready to sell it, I missed the window by about a month. Everyone said found footage is too many people did it because it's cheap to do. So you know what? We're done with it. So now they're done with it. So what am I going to do with this movie now? Well, I went back, I rewrote it, and I borrowed another $50,000, and I changed it into a mix of found footage and real footage, a real film. And now that movie's done very well for me. I was very, very lucky. I did it with kid actors from Disney Channel and all that, where, you could get them at scale. And at least they're not known names, but at least they have a resume that you could at least put on a poster. And that's what I suggest you doing. If worse comes to worse and you can't afford an actor or can't get an actor, always turn to a TV star, because at least they got some kind of clout to them.
Yeah, and with TV being so prevalent nowadays, there's a lot more TV stars out there because on Netflix alone there's 300 shows, 300 episodic shows now. There's a lot of Amazon, and you have your cable package, and then you have your Netflix and all the other channels. There's a lot of episodic content up there now.
Yeah, well, and the problem with all this is that 10 years ago, Blockbuster would hold on to your movie forever. I mean, you could go in there and get a movie from 20 years ago. Nowadays, where do you go other than the number one distributor in the world, and that's Walmart. Walmart, believe it or not, is the number one distributor because they hold on to your movies for years and years, and they put in that $5 bucket. And if you could be thrown in that $5 bucket, you're the luckiest producer in the world, because that's where the money's to be had, because they could keep it in that bucket for 3 years, where Netflix is lucky to hold on. If you get into Netflix, could hold on your movie for only 3 months. Redbox, you're lucky to be in it for a month. So there's nowhere that has a lasting way of selling your movie other than Walmart right now.
And that's a very good point, Johnny. You know, I was one time I was actually at a film producer sort of seminar, and they also talked about, you know, what the cost of shelf space is. So if you walked into a Target, a Best Buy, a Walmart, and you start looking around the movie section, you know, each time the cover is horizontally versus vertically, you know what I mean? Like the cover's facing out towards you and you can see it, versus if you just see the spine, you know, there's a huge cost difference between those two because it's about shelf space. And, you know, they have the, you know, what eye level everyone goes to first. They were talking about all that stuff, and you know, now you know with Blockbuster gone, and you know, now it's just, you know, Netflix and, you know, like you said, Walmart. You know, giving in that bin now, that bin's a whole nother, you know, almost like another revenue cycle or another opportunity. You know what I mean? And that's sort of. And I know what you mean too about going into that bin. I've seen tons and tons of movies from friends of mine that have made movies, and I've seen them in there. And they said, you know, that was actually good because people do actually buy from those big barrels of movies.
Oh yeah, it really is. I mean, that's the only place that people, you know, are film watchers. The real film watchers go to that bucket because they want to watch something new, and they want something that they could buy 3 of them instead of going to the theater and having to pay for one movie.
Yeah, and you know, and also, Johnny, just to sort of reminisce, you know, when we talk about Blockbuster, I remember going there too a lot, and I wanted to ask, you know, do you think that the Blockbuster in any way, shape, or form is going to come back, like where you could actually just go to a store with your friends and actually just, you know, actually rent physical movies?
You know what, I wanted to open up one so bad, but every time I do the research, and you know, the problem is, you know, like my daughters right now, even though I'm in the business, I'll catch them watching a movie that's in theaters here right now because everything's being pirated. Everything's online. Everything's free now. I mean, you could really watch anything you want at any time for free. So why would you need to go out when you could just download it or get it online? And that's the problem is that, you know, I used to love going to the Blockbuster with my kids and us going through every movie. I mean, that was fun. And now it's that time's gone, and it's really hurting families, and that's what movies are all about. Movies are all about bringing families together and enjoying an experience, a dream, you know. And now it's just a matter of, do they have time to watch one? And that's where I really miss Blockbuster, and I think the film industry is really hurting because it's gone.
Yeah, it's. I know there's a lot of piracy out there, and I also wonder too, as we talk about net neutrality, you know, how much that will play into it. Because if you're paying more for your internet, if you're paying more for certain features and packages, you know, going to those torrent sites is not going to be as readily accessible as it is now if net neutrality goes away. Yeah.
Well, and the other thing you got to remember is that you own a Blockbuster, you got to buy how many DVDs, where online you just need a copy of the movie and you don't have to make anything anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
So
yeah.
It's hard to compete.
Yeah, but it would be fun though. Just in a best case scenario, to just own a Blockbuster or something, you know, like almost like what Tarantino used to work at. You know, what was it, Video Archive?
I totally agree. And I think it can still work in certain cities. I really do, because a lot of people don't want to go on the internet. You know, you just have to find the right town. Like LA is not the right town, but maybe somewhere in Spokane, Washington, or Boise, Idaho, may be the perfect spot for that.
Yeah, you know, there's still a few Blockbusters left, and they're all in Alaska.
Really, I believe that. See, there you go. People don't want to be hibernating in their house; they want to get out. That's great. Love hearing that.
Yeah, and also because, you know, the internet there is slow as well. But and you know, you're right. I do want to get out, but you know, they were able to go out and, you know, go to the Blockbuster, and, you know, they don't have to stream it or anything. They can just, you know, play it right from the Blu-ray or the DVD. And when I did read that, you know, I started saying, you know what, it makes sense, you know, because, you know, I don't know how populated Alaska is, and, you know, but I know it's not that populated. You know what I mean? It's, you know, when you think of Alaska, you think of igloos and polar bears.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Johnny, as we talk about getting back to, I'm sorry, now I started getting off topic again, but as we go back to talking about your career and producing and everything, and you said you had to prove that you could direct, and I think that's very, very critical, because I think that happens to a lot of people. I think that's one of those it's unique to everybody, but it's also universal at the same time, because people want to see what you're capable of. They want to see what you can do. So you made the horror movie Delirium. And what was your experience, just getting that made in terms of, hey, this is the movie where I'm going to show everybody what I can do?
Well, the thing is that, going back to the whole subject is that, people don't want to be your first try. They just won't do it. And no matter what script you have, that's their career on the line. So that's why you have to be able to show and prove yourself. And that's what's tricky is that, unless you have, everyone doesn't look at your movie as $100,000 movie or $200,000 movie. They look at it as a movie. So you can't tell someone, well, this was only this, that's why I did this. They don't care. They only care, did you make a quality movie? Not caring about your budget or anything else. So now you're competing against that, which really makes it hard. So when I did my movie, the background that I had was the most important, of learning everyone's job. Because once I did that allowed me to have a 6-man crew. That's all I shot my movie with. I didn't have any more than that. I knew what I needed to do. I prepped it. Prep is the most important thing, where today's movies, they don't give you prep anymore. They give you 4 weeks. To do a great movie, it needs to be prepped so great, and having every backstop, every way of a problem happens, and ready to make change at any time. I don't think I've ever shot a script that we shot to the script itself. There's always a moment where you think, oh my God, what if I did this? And you have to be prepared for that. And you have to have a great team behind you. Remember, when you're directing, your number one thing that you should be doing at that moment is finding the right DP for you, because you're not just making the movie. His eyes behind that thing, and he needs to move that camera. No director ever says, okay, now move that camera here or there, and that's great. But you got to find moments through the dialogue that gets you to that other character to not cause this delay of a camera sweep or a hard cut. And that's what's so important to hire, is that finding that perfect soulmate that you could find in a DP, that you guys think alike, you imagine each other alike, and you guys could pick the shot perfectly and know that he has free range to do whatever he wants to do to find that as well. It's a partnership. And that's what everyone wants to say, well, I did this movie. It's not I. I mean, every movie I've done with my DPs. I have 2 DPs I trust wholeheartedly, and I don't want to do a movie without them, because we know each other. We know what we both like. And so I would suggest that to everyone. And product. Know what your product is. I mean, know what is going to sell for the next 4 years. Don't like found footage for me. When I made the found footage, I did the worst mistake, because I created something that was hot at the moment. I didn't look into the future, and that's what you need to do. If I could do a found footage, imagine how many other films are going to be found footage. So what can I do? What can I do to be different? Because at $200,000, the only thing that's going to make you stand out is if you have something that's different and new and fresh. And so that's what you really have to consider. Just don't go out and shoot a movie to show that you know how to direct, because no one's going to. The only time someone's going to tell you that you're a great director is when they love your movie. Not love your shots, love your movie.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Johnny. And it's always about that whole experience, right? And you mentioned building a team, so just about finding the right director, cinematography, so you know how to work together. I couldn't agree more, because I've been a part of film sets like that. I've seen film sets like that where they want to hire somebody because they got a nice camera, or they want to hire somebody because they can talk the talk, but when it comes time when it becomes crunch time, it all sort of falls away.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So yeah, and also you talked about just standing out from the pack. I think that is, obviously it's more important than ever, because right now it's a war of eyeballs and ears, right? It's a war of, how can I get my movie seen, and by making it, as unique as possible, not sounding like something that someone's has already seen, which, as we talk about found footage, that's why I think Paranormal Activity really found that niche. Even like the Blair Witch Project as well. The Blair Witch Project, they really were able to capitalize on the fact that the internet was so new. It was in an infancy stage pages, and everyone really believed it. And the marketing was brilliant behind that because it made it seem like it was a real mystery and this movie was going to be, you're watching a documentary, and then with Paranormal Activity, it was I think they did something similar, but they were able to just capitalize on this, and he made it for even cheaper than Blair Witch was. I think Oren made it for what, $13,000. So it's like standing out, just finding that niche and standing out is sort of key. And I think to do that rather than just reverse engineer it. I think that the way to do that is find what movies you like and write a script that you'd like to see. And go from there, and then sort of use your own what resources you have, and then see how you can get it to sort of fit in that context. So you're not going out and going, well, I need to go out and rent a yacht to blow up or something like that. It's stuff it's stuff that you have access to that you can use to make your movie.
Well, and the most important thing is, like, when I say find something new and fresh, you have to be willing to get ready to change your whole thought pattern of that, because you could fall on your face by doing that just as fast as you get successful. And by what I mean by that is that when I made my movie, I knew I had to be different. So I wanted to make Stand By Me meets a horror movie. I wanted 5 characters, and I made these guys hang out with each other for 3 months. I filmed them for 3 months, just hanging out until I knew they were best friends and wanted to hang out with each other. That's when I made the movie, and that's how I knew it was going to get that Stand By Me moment. It was more about character. And so I made this movie. It had scares in it and it had these great moments. And when I made it, I turned around and people, when they got that title horror on there and you're not delivering horror, my idea was great and it looked great. It won some film festivals. But at the end of the day, when people buy it, they said, Johnny, we don't know how to categorize this movie. We don't even know how to sell it because it's not really horror and it is. So we don't know what to do with it. So that's when I had to go back, not only to change it out of found footage, but I had to put more scares in it and cut out a lot of the dramatic parts to where I built these characters. So a lot of stuff I truly believed in, I had to change because at the end of the day, it's not about what I think is perfect. It's what, the audience and what the buyers and the distribution companies thinks is good.
Yeah. And again, as we talk about sort of selling, it's sort of like, exactly what is everyone looking for? What is everyone buying? How do I get people to buy this movie? And as we talk about your second film that in the past couple of months, because again in the pre-interview we were talking about how the past couple of months have been actually really good for you. Now Delirium is coming out soon, which is the movie we were just talking about, and now you have a second film that's coming out, Vengeance: A Love Story with Nicolas Cage. So how did you go about getting that film, Johnny? Did you put that together, or was that something that was sort of pitched to you?
Well, no, it was a rape movie. They Patriot Pictures asked me to produce it with Nick Cage, who I've been friends with for 20 years, and I met him during Gone in 60. We did a lot of movies after that together, and so I was producing it. The director I didn't believe in. I didn't think he could pull it off for what I had, so I basically had to fire him. And Nick wanted to direct the movie himself, and I said, great. So since me and him had this great collaboration together, he was so busy with his schedule, and I would. He called me up. He goes, hey, can you start the shot list? Hey, show me the locations. I'll pick them and all this stuff. So we were working hand in hand. And then, when the budget started getting tighter and tighter and tighter, I had to cut days out of the movie. And I told him, you have to do this movie in 21 days. And he said, that's going to be very hard for me to do. Plus my schedule, Johnny, I don't know if I could pull it off. Why don't you do it? And so everyone agreed. The producers and everyone said, yeah, Johnny should do it. He knows the movie the best. Then DGA stepped in and said, nope, Johnny can't do it because he's a producer on the film. And by Directors Guild rules, you can't take over a movie for a director if you're the producer. So we didn't have a director. We were supposed to start shooting in 48 hours. And 8 hours before we started shooting, my producer, my financier, got his attorneys after the DGA, and they finally agreed that I could direct the movie. So I didn't have that much warning that this was my movie, and it was about rape, and it was a sensitive story, and it was very hard. So I just worked every night and every day I was off to prep this movie, for every day. And it was a really hard movie. But I'm very proud of it, and Nick is very, very proud of it. And I think we pulled off something special.
So when you mentioned prepping, even on your days off, Johnny, was that more like you wearing your producer's hat, like you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, is this location really locked? What could go wrong? What else am I going to need? Was it stuff like that?
No, I already, I do that. I mean, like when I direct my last movie, Hangman, and everything else, my deal in my head is I'll go produce it for the first 2 weeks, and I'll get everything handled with unions, everything else, and make all the deals. But then I shut off from my producer hat, take that off, and I go right into directing. And when I did this on Vengeance, it was about seeing the scenes. I usually have this weird thing that people make fun of me for it, but I could see things. I could see scenes in my head go around me. I could see cars pass by my body when I'm just standing there looking. So I like to close down a street and sit in the middle of the street and look at it and find the scene. And when I see that, then I could really picture where all my cameras could go and all that. And that's why, again, saying a great DP can visualize your story, because as I talk out loud, he's seeing what I'm seeing now too. So I had to make this movie. It was Nick's movie, and I had to try to find out how to make it mine, where I could believe it. And shooting a rape scene is very sensitive, and it's very hard to shoot a rape scene because people get so disturbed by it that your movie could be ruined by a bad rape scene, by making it too much. And so my rape scene in this movie, a little girl is watching her mom getting raped, and I thought the way I could do this and make it violent, because it needed to be violent, because we needed to know why these guys should get what they get by the end of this movie, that I said, what better than to show a rape scene through the eyes of this girl and what her visual is and what her pain is that she's feeling, and show very little of the rape itself. And that's was different than Nick's version of it, and that's where I brought mine in. So that's what I do during prep, to try to prepare what I feel the movie should look like.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point too, because there are movies that have very violent rape scenes. Like I Spit on Your Grave, Irreversible, Straw Dogs, just to name a few. And and again, you were mentioning doing things a little bit differently, and I think the way that you did it, it definitely sounds like obviously you're taking a very touchy subject, a very hard subject, but it's a different way to sort of show this narrative, rather than obviously like the graphic rape, like I was just in the three movies I just mentioned.
Right, absolutely, you're right.
So as and you mentioned your third movie, by the way, and I this is actually the movie that got us talking through Mr. Kehoe is Hangman. Again, I saw the poster and I said, "Wow, that looks awesome." And again, then Michael, just introduced us out of sheer luck or law of attraction, whatever you want to call it. But as we talk about Hangman. I wanted to ask, what is it like? Well, I wanted to ask actually, because I want to ask what it's like working with Al Pacino, but I also want to ask, too, Johnny, how did you go about with this movie and getting this made with Hangman? Did you, was this another project that you were able to get made by yourself, or was this pitched to you?
Well, after I did the Vengeance, a love story, Hangman was in the company of Patriot, and so they had a director already attached to it. And when Michael, the financier, saw the movie Vengeance, he said, I want you to do Hangman. And so I had to talk my way into Arnold Rifkin, who was the other producer, and he didn't really want me because he already had his director. So it was a struggle. And Michael said, well, I'm not going to finance it unless Johnny directs it. And he goes, well, it's not our decision. It's Al Pacino's. So Al Pacino, didn't want to set up the meeting. He said, well, let me see what he did before. And he watched my Vengeance, a love story. He stopped after the rape scene and called and said, I'd like to meet him, because he was blown away by how I treated the rape scene. And he didn't watch the rest of the movie, which was funny. He just wanted to see something that really caught his eye. And so the scariest day of my life is knowing I'm going to go meet the #1 filmmaker of all time, the iconic Al Pacino. How can I top this? And how am I going to talk to this man who's worked with Scorsese and Coppola, and let him think that I'm as good as them, And there's one thing I have, and that's passion. I don't care about the money. I don't care about anything else but to try to make a film that is that gets people emotionally involved. And that's what I am about all movies. Here, my favorite movies are like Miracle and Rocky and all those movies, not, great action movies. And so going in there, I guess I gave Al a pitch that he just said, your energy's so big and you believe in it so much, your words. And before we knew it, we were doing lines opposite of each other. And he goes, when I say this, and I'd come back with the line right after that. And he would come back to me, and we started improvising. And before I know it, I was going there every day, and we were doing improv. Finally, he'd call me at 2 a.m. and go, okay, this person with 2 lines, Johnny, the cop that's in the police station. I said, cop number 2? And he goes, yeah. He goes, where were they born? I go, Minnesota. He goes, is he from a single family? I said, no, their family's still married, but they're having problems. And it was what we thought of what the characters would be. So when we got to the set, he was able to focus differently on each character, knowing what they went through in their lives, even if it was a one-line character. And that's what really made this movie so amazing, is because it just became so real. And to work with Al Pacino, probably any director in the world should be as lucky to have the moment that I had with this man, who's probably the most incredible actor and human being I've ever met.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to, that's one of the questions I want to ask about working with Al Pacino was, I mean, obviously there had to be some kind of almost like intimidation because, Al Pacino has been in so many freaking movies that have just, skyrocketed, like, Serpico and which where he played a detective also. And I mean, that's what I was going to ask is, if he ever just, not like coming with an ego, but just the fact that, hey, look, it's Al Pacino. I mean, this man has just made so many awesome movies. And it's like, how do you direct somebody like that who's worked with Scorsese and Coppola and stuff like that? It's just without being like, well, you know what I mean? So that's good, Johnny. I'm glad that, you were able to sort of find that core. And again, you're passionate, you know what you're doing. And, and I want to ask you too, as you're sort of going back and forth with him, and he asked, where was this character born? That's just you ad-libbing. I mean, what would have happened just as a what if, like if you would have said, Al, I don't know.
Well, the thing is that I prepared myself so well that I knew everything that I need. I read that script 18 times before I met with Al, and I was involved with everyone. I knew where they were in the scene. I already pictured the set. I already pictured who they were, how they carried their shoulders, how they walked, and everything else. So, I mean, the great part about Hangman is that every role drove the story, so it was easy to know what emotions these people felt. It's like in my opening scene when we find the first hanging, everyone said, well, Johnny, this girl's so weak. Why? So why isn't she supposed to be a cop? I said, yeah, she's a beat cop working 2 a.m. shift, and she works a schoolyard. And so it's, to me, that character needed to be a little bit weaker so my lead character, Rooney, could come into this movie and be strong and not be compared to another cop. And so it was stuff like that made me realize that when I met Al, is that I already thought this stuff out. And I already pretty much knew. I didn't know the backstory so much, which I learned a lot of, but I pictured this girl was wounded somehow and she was weak. And so what would that lead to? And that led to what her family life would be. And so Al brought it more out in me as well. But we did a lot of rewrites from the prep. It was an everyday meeting, everyday talk while I prepped the movie. So it was really quite interesting. He wouldn't allow stuff that he felt that the audience would stop at. As a matter of fact, he sat in the editing room with me probably 7 days, didn't say a word, just hung out with me to see how we were doing this. And, at the end of the movie, I told him, Al, I know you thought we made 7, but it's a character piece about four people struggling with their lives to find out how they could help each other. And that's what the movie kind of is. Again, I'm all about relationships and movies. And I know that everyone's going to go see it, probably is going to go into it, oh, my God, this is another 7, because that's what the trailer looks like. And it is. It's like a 7, but it's more about having a relationship with these actors more than the normal 7 kind of movie.
Yeah, and I have I haven't seen the movie yet, but I actually ordered it on Vudu, and it's out early on Vudu right now. So I'm actually going to watch it not tonight, but tomorrow. So I can't wait. And I saw it was up there, and I said I should. I actually ordered it. I was like, you know what? I'm going to have Johnny on the podcast, and I thought I was going to have time to watch it, but I didn't. But I made sure to order it. And by the way, everyone, I'm going to link to that in the show notes. Hangman on Vudu. It's actually out before it's in theaters or the same time it's in theaters.
Yes.
And which I think, by the way, Johnny, I think that's a really good idea for a lot of films in general. Because it sort of gives you, so a different form of access, in case, the movie isn't playing around you, or if, there's not a theater you like around you. I've always said this is a really good idea that you know what I mean? As we talk again about VOD and everything else, I always think that's a good idea for a lot of films to do that, is it to come out either at the same time it's in theaters or even or shortly then after, you know what I mean?
Right, exactly. I totally agree with you.
And so Johnny, as we sort of, have been talking for about 45 minutes, is there anything in closing that you want to talk about, Johnny, or anything that we can get a chance to discuss?
Half the reason why I do these interviews and all that is because, again, I care about movies, and the worst thing about this business is failure and how low it could really bring you and how easy it is to quit this business. And there's so many people that are more passionate about films than probably anything in this world. And I just have to tell everyone is that, knowledge is everything. And the key thing you got to be is the smartest guy in the room. Learn more than the guy that you're meeting, and learn everything you can about him as well. I mean, have the knowledge of knowing his work and how it compares to your work. But people, the ego gets really big in this industry, and that is what destroys people, unfortunately. So I just say knowledge is everything, and learn as much as you can before you are ready to go out there. You get one chance at this. Don't blow it just because you get that opportunity. Be ready for your opportunity.
Johnny, that is absolutely great advice. Always be ready and always learn as much as you possibly can. And Johnny, where can people find you at online?
Well, I'm at the martinifilms.net, martinifilms.net, that is. I have a website that explains my story and my whole career from stunts to acting to producing. I'm going to start opening up seminars of how to raise money and to help people in Georgia, all my crew members and all that want to become better filmmakers and even more filmmakers. So I'm going to start putting on seminars how to go about putting together films and all that. Hopefully I'll have that recorded. And I do have an upcoming movie with our friend Michael Kehoe, which I got to tell you I'm very, very proud of, and I cannot wait to get started on this thing. And the movie's called Judge Not. I think that is more like the Seven that everyone wants to see. It's really dark and gritty, and that's kind of like my genre that I want to go with, like David Fincher did.
That's really, really cool. And you and Mr. Kehoe together, that's going to be interesting because, again, because Kehoe knows everybody and,
yeah. Absolutely. I'm very excited.
Yeah, and Johnny, when you are doing those seminars, let me know, and I will add them to the show notes as well. I'll update them. Everybody, everything that Johnny and I talked about on the show in this episode will be on the show notes at davebullis.com. Twitter, it's at Dave_Bullis. Johnny Martin, I want to say thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much, Dave. Very nice meeting you all.
Find Dave at davebullis.com. Please make sure to subscribe and share the podcast.